I am Dungeon Judge Screaming Wyvern, and today, the 30th anniversary of the founding of the Adventurers Guild, I'm here to talk to you about XCrawl. I'm going to take you back to 1976 and the discovery of Warsong. We're going to talk about the rise of Dungeon Battle and Will Fleeman. And of course, we're going to talk about the present and future of the XCrawl here on XCrawl, the absolute basics. Let's go all the way back to the time before the Great Cataclysm. Our younger viewers may not be aware that when I was born, we knew next to nothing about the time we now call the Heroic Age. All that changed in 1976 when the University of Washington, performing an archaeological dig in Syria, uncovered the magical sword Warsong. While a pre-cataclysm artifact that hadn't already been claimed by a dragon was amazing by itself, Warsong was an intelligent talking sword who had been the weapon of Zimble the Troubadour and knew a great deal of history. History Warsong had helped make in some cases. But we didn't just learn history from Warsong, we learned about adventurers, their quests, and the ruins they explored, especially lost places in Zura Azura. Historical nonfiction straight from Warsong flew off shelves in bookstores and libraries, and fictional stories were just as popular, even the early books which were poorly written and barely edited. This led to television shows and movies, and of course the rise of the monster wranglers, who were responsible for bringing live monsters to the studios. And then a small company released Dungeon Battle, taking the existing hobby of historical miniature combat and writing a new version steeped in the stories of the Heroic Age. Within only a few years, Dungeon Battle was not just a profitable venture for its writers, but for the hundreds of conventions where Dungeon Battle tournaments attracted huge crowds. That takes us to October of 1981 and the first live-action Dungeon Battle game. Will Fleeman was a huge fan of the game and had in fact decided to leave his studies at the Boston College of Magic for the tournament scene. His group, using padded weapons and fake spells, took to playing in an unfinished parking garage, but their game became too real one night when they came across a pack of ghouls. Using only their wits and the tales of the Heroic Age, these brave gamers actually managed to defeat the ghouls and report their existence to the authorities. The world went crazy. Kids, trying to play a game for real, run into real enemies and defeat them. Emperor Ronald would end up inviting Will and his friends to congratulate them personally and pardon him for using unauthorized magic since Will wasn't in the Mages Guild. Emperor Ronald's approval rating soared after this meeting, and he ended up throwing a winter solstice feast in their honor and gave them all the George Augustus Medal of Honor. The most important moment at this feast was when the Emperor took Will aside and asked him if he was interested in creating a televised event inspired by Dungeon Battle. For those who didn't know, before the Oracle of the Florida Keys declared Emperor Ronald the replacement for Emperor James III, he was the city mayor of Los Angeles and had been researching ways to legally increase blood sacrifices to the gods while increasing tourism. Gladiatorial combat of convicted criminals did not have the desired public backing, so he was forced to abandon those plans. This live-action Dungeon Battle, on the other hand, would be just as much of a blood sport, but would draw in volunteer adventurers instead. Even better, sporting events have always meant sponsors, and that would mean prizes to keep the adventurers coming. The first Emperor's Cup was a brutal, bloody affair. Modern crawlers still invoke the name of the first person to die in the games, the sorcerer and sorceress Amazing Rando, to remind them that if they keep going, they may die in an unceremonious way. There were several groups which protested the XCrawl. There were a lot more people that thought it was the best thing ever, including Zeus. The Tennessee Scorchers, who walked away with 18,000 gold in cash and prizes, certainly agreed that it was the best thing ever. The first few years of the game were a mess, as dungeon judges tried to figure out how to plan their dungeons properly. Some of the dungeons were meat grinders, and the contestants fell to the monsters absurdly quickly. Others were the opposite, and one crawl lasted a month, with 15 of the 16 crawler teams defeating the dungeon with no casualties. The only reason why it wasn't 16-0 was because the Barbarian Quintet gave up after working on a puzzle for 6 hours. It was a shape puzzle made for toddlers. So Emperor Ronald formed the Adventurers Guild to protect the adventurers and the sponsors, mostly the sponsors, to try and improve the finances of the XCrawl. I have been asked to remind my viewers that the motto of XCrawl is "If you die, you die," and that the Dumble Z's hatching out of the adventurers' bodies 3 months after they left the dungeon was just part of the encounter. Therefore, Fleeman was legally not responsible for the loss of life, property, and livestock caused by the escape and now rampaging Dumblebee swarms. In the modern era, we have the Boffer Leagues, inspired by Fleeman's original live-action dungeon battle games and its padded weapons. This is the Action League for ages 10 to 13, Varsity Action for middle school, and Division 5 in high school. Division 4 is collegiate level, although there are still no monsters and the weapons are still padded. Simple non-lethal spells and more complicated traps are permitted. There are also Division 4 leagues outside of colleges, often consisting of former collegiate players, retired pro-level crawlers, and those with the skills and training to go pro, but no interest in risking death. From Division 3 onward, the games are professional, and the risk of death is very real. This is when true monsters are brought in, and the size of the arenas are no longer limited. Because of the expense of the spectacle, most commoners can't attend even the most entry-level Division 3 crawl in person. Sports networks show highlight reels, and billions pay large sums to fully stream the crawls by their favorite dungeon judges or crawler teams. That's one of the reasons why Division 4 stays so popular. It's XCrawl for the common man. We are seeing the beginning of a new decade of the Adventurers Guild and approaching the second decade of Duke Bradley Leibrock's role. Now, some people feel that the crawls have been deadlier since Duke Leibrock took over the guild from his aunt. Even if that were true, it means that there's more opportunities for average citizens to earn their places in professional crawls. Just imagine a librarian having a chance to train in spellcasting, or a school teacher training as a specialist. The Adventurers Guild is on the lookout for their next great crawler, and that crawler could be you. This video is brought to you by XCrawl, the Adventurers Guild, and Roxy Cola, the official drink of XCrawl since 2003. Roxy Cola, available everywhere in the Emperor, now in Orange Mint.